I really do get a kick out of every year around Dr. King's birthday, the federal holiday, and we get treated with all the quotes and all the laudatory comments about how amazing Dr. King was and what he stood for and what he did for America. And then the same folk then turn around and literally vote against, speak against the very things that he actually fought for. And so Sunday night, I had some followers of mine who sent me a sermon by Houston's Ed Young Sr., who leads Second Baptist Church. And Ed Young is one of the most prominent white conservative preachers in the country. Second Baptist has several locations in Houston. His son has a massive church in North Texas, and he's one of the biggest voices among the conservative Christian movement. And lately he has been highly critical of progressive policies and the left, and criticizing, lying about Houston, saying Houston has the highest crime rate in the country. That was a lie. Telling folks we should be opposing cash bail. I mean, all kind of BS from the pulpit, constantly lying. He's been checked by Houston Mayor Sylvester Turner on several occasions as well. But he gave a sermon called Created Equal, and I listened to it, and I had to get a laugh out of it as I watched him go through it, and with the praise of Dr. King. And so I just wanted to just begin to break this thing down. So why don't I go ahead and play it, and I'm gonna start it and stop it and walk y'all through some of the nonsense that we heard from him that we often hear from other white conservative preachers who make the same mistake in terms of trying to look all good with racial reconciliation and speaking against racism. But it's amazing how they ignore a lot of other stuff that happens. But go ahead, let's start it right now.
Yesterday, I went back and I looked at 400 years of life in America for the African American who was brought over here as slaves. I sort of knew all that, but I didn't have any concept of the length of the bigotry, the prejudice,
get ready to stop it,
the inhumane way Americans treated fellow human beings made in the image of God. Because if you know your history, slaves first came over here in 1619, and I do not buy the 1619 phony history. That's not what I'm saying. But they came.
Stop right there. Stop right there. Stop right there. First of all, Ed Young, y'all, was 86 years old. He was born in Mississippi. He pastored in South Carolina. How in the hell are you unaware of the treatment of African Americans in the United States? You were born and raised in Mississippi. Really? Now, y'all notice right there how he mentioned the first slaves coming in 1619, and then I don't mean that phony 1619 history project. Notice how he slid that in, okay? See, this is what they do. See, their anger is at Nicole Hannah-Jones and all the other folks who participated in that, because what folk like Ed Young don't like is the rest of the story. They don't want you to hear. And so maybe, Ed, the reason you didn't fully understand the depths and the treatment of Africa, how African Americans were being treated, because the 1619 Project didn't exist. Maybe because you were presented a whitewashed version of American history. So as opposed to trying to throw shade at it, maybe you should spend some time reading that. Press play.
With the settlement of Jamestown, the Massachusetts Bay Company, and they came primarily for profit and for gold. A little later, we know about Plymouth Rock, when pilgrims came because they loved Jesus and they wanted to worship freely and independently in a new land. So a totally different ball game. But in Jamestown, the secular invasion of our country, they brought with them slaves, first slavery in our history. And then we know from that moment, listen, roughly 250 years, just hold on to that number, 250 years we treated fellow human beings made in the image of God as if they were animals, and sometimes worse than we treat our own animals.
Oh, I gotta put a pause there, Ed, because yes, slavery lasted about 243 years. You throw in the Civil War, then you got the Reconstruction period. But you might want to add on another 100 years, Ed. Great Compromise of 1866, the election of 1876 leads to the Great Compromise of 1877, which leads to 92 years of Jim Crow. Black folks in Jim Crow were treated like animals, were treated as less than human beings. Lynchings that took place in your home state of Mississippi, in South Carolina, where you were a pastor, in Alabama, in Tennessee, in Arkansas, and Texas, and on and on and on. So I'm trying to understand why you're only limiting this treatment of African Americans to that period of slavery when that treatment existed beyond slavery when it was over, or as Douglas Blackman called it, slavery without, first of all, it was slavery without shackles. Slavery continued, just weren't in shackles. Press play.
That's the truth. The Constitution was written by wealthy men, intelligent men, supposedly God-fearing men, but 8 out of the first.
Constitution was not written by wealthy men. It was written by wealthy white men. That distinction is kind of important to the conversation. Press play.
First 12 presidents of the United States were slave owners. They were slave owners. Now you can build all kind of little anonymous, how people treat their slaves like family and all that, but it is brutality and is evil any way you look at it. And now we see Dr. King came.
Stop. I'm sorry. We went from slavery to Dr. King. Damn near 100 years. Dr. King does not come onto the national consciousness until the Montgomery bus boycott in 1955. He literally went from the end of slavery to Dr. King. How you skip 90 years? How do you skip Frederick Douglass? How do you skip Martin Delany? How do you skip Booker T. Washington, W.B. Du Bois, A. Philip Randolph, Ida B. Wells Barnett? How do you skip 90 years of black struggle for freedom and you just go, ooh, then we got Dr. King? Press play.
And through prayer, he decided to bring about a revolution different from any other revolutions, except maybe when Mahatma Gandhi, through pacifism, liberated India from the British Empire through nonviolence. Dr. King took that path. It was dangerous. It was deadly. And he began through those years to do things, to say things, always in a biblical Christian context. Don't miss that.
He began to say things and do things. Ed, can we name some of them? I mean, the way it sounds like Dr. King just prayed and gave sermons. No, that was policy. There were things behind that. He was arrested. There were protests, and it wasn't just him. It was Thurgood Marshall and the NAACP Legal Defense Fund. It was Dr. Dorothy Height. It was James Farmer. It was Core. It was SNCC. It was a plethora of individuals. It was, I mean, we can go, it was Ella Baker and others. It was Roy Wilkins. It was Whitney Young. I mean, we can go on and on with the folks who were involved in this. Come on, Doc. Press play.
Don't miss that. Don't miss that. I submit to you that along with Billy Graham and maybe internationally Winston Churchill, Dr. Martin Luther King was the most influential individual in the 20th century by far.
But Ed, tell your white congregants why. Go deeper. Ed, come on. If you're going to walk through scripture, walk through the text and the life of Dr. King. Sitting right here, Ed. 7 volumes of Dr. King's writings. The papers of Martin Luther King Jr. from Stanford University, Claiborne Carson, and others. 7 volumes. And not even all of his papers. The books he read. Doc, you got to go a little bit deeper than that, player. Go ahead, press play.
He saved America. He preached the gospel. He was indeed a great man.
Dr. King did not save America because he preached the gospel. Dr. King and others redefined America because they chose to stand up and fight for freedom and equality and fight against white supremacy, fight for the poor, fight for the folks who have been ignored. He didn't just preach the gospel. The Bible, Ed, says faith without works is dead. You can't stand before your congregation and give a sermon about Dr. King's faith and ignore his works and not mention that. But there's a reason why you don't want to mention his works. Because his works then contradicts what you believe today. Press play.
Martin Luther King speaking at Southern Methodist University 2 years before his assassination, 1966. He said, a doctrine of black supremacy is just as dangerous as a doctrine of white supremacy. God is not interested in freedom of black men or brown men or yellow men. God is interested in the freedom of the whole human race, the creation of a society where every man will respect the dignity and worth of personality. Dr. King, a couple of years before his assassination at SMU.
Oh my God, I'm fascinated by Ed transitioning from Dr. King's work to a piece of his speech at Southern Methodist in 1966. So I decided to look up that particular speech. Go to my iPad. This, ladies and gentlemen, is a transcript of that particular speech. Ed talked about the white supremacy, the black supremacy part. Let me scroll down. Let me keep going. 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 Oh, then I have arrived right there at the top of the screen, the one paragraph that Ed Young was speaking about. Ladies and gentlemen, the speech that Dr. King gave is 7,485 words. Let me say that again, just in case you missed what I just said. The speech that Dr. King gave at Southern Methodist University is 7,485 words. Ed Young skipped 6,345 words before he decided to cherry pick the segment of Dr. King's speech where he's talking about black supremacy. Now, if anybody understands and actually has read the history of Dr. King, what they will know and understand is Dr. King, whenever you saw him talking about black supremacy, he was specifically talking about the Nation of Islam. He was talking about, here's his book, Where We Go From Here, Chaos or Community. In this particular book, where he talked about there are 4 institutions that are primed to liberate black America, he lists the Negro Church, the Negro Press, Negro fraternities and sororities, Negro professional and business organizations. And then he talks about the Nation of Islam, and he says, while he praises them for the work that they have done to clean up black men and to be moral and upstanding, he disagrees with them about black supremacy. That's what he was talking about. In the same book, he talked about black power being an empty statement with nothing behind it. That's what King talked about. You can hear numerous speeches with him doing so. But there's a reason why Ed mentioned, why he just cherry picks that part of King's speech at SMU for this.
So I submit to you that we're proud to be American. I'm proud to be American, but we can't overlook this disastrous history. At the same time, all important, the color of your faith says all of those in the woke agenda. What does that mean?
He said the woke agenda. Now you understand why he pulls out that segment on black supremacy, because it is the setup for the attack on the woke agenda. He then tries to define the woke agenda. Press play.
Means, according to those in the left part of our United States, that if you were born black or some other color, that defines who you are, and you are, listen to me carefully, automatically a racist by being white.
That is a fundamental and absolute lie. It is an absolute lie. That is not what being woke means. That is how white conservatives have redefined wokeness. They have used it as the attack against diversity, equity, and inclusion, the attack against multiculturalism, the attack against what we're trying to achieve. That's how they have redefined it in their own way. That is not the definition. Press play.
It doesn't matter what you've done, what you believe, where you've been. You are a racist by virtue of your birth. And more than that, and this is hard to believe, there's not a thing in the world you can ever do to repent and to convince anybody anywhere because you're white that you're not a racist.
We all know that's a flat out lie. We've had Jane Elliott on this show. We've had Tim Wise on this show. We've had others on this show. We know that there are white brothers and sisters who are involved in the fight for equality. That is simply not true. We know for a fact James Reed was beaten to death. A pastor from Boston was beaten there in Selma, standing up for voting rights. We know white woman Viola Liuzzo from Michigan had her head blown off coming back from Montgomery back to Selma. We know, again, that other white folks who were killed during the civil rights movement, and we know folk today who are involved in protests, who are on the front lines, who are not black. Sorry, Ed, you simply are wrong, and that's a flat out lie. But when you have your own definition of wokeness, now we understand why you were utterly confused. Hit play.
There's no redemption. You can be anti-racist, but you'll never reach the goal until you're still categorized like that. A leader of Black Lives Matter said, a matter of public record, anyone who waves an American flag by definition, whomever you are, you're a racist.
Now, it's amazing how you could go to find Dr. King's speech and go down 6,000 plus words and pluck out a paragraph, but you can't name who this so-called Black Lives Matter leader is. Do you have a name, Ed? Are they actually a Black Lives Matter leader? Who? Are they a local person? Are they a national leader? Who really is the person you're quoting, Ed, so we can have the context? Oh, you just say a Black Lives Matter leader, it's a matter of public record. Nice try. We ain't falling for the banana in the tailpipe. Press play.
Everything is tragically defined by racism. How different that is from Dr. Martin Luther King's understanding of the racial challenges we had in America then, and we progressed a great deal, but we still have some ways to go, but how far that we have come. You see, he would tell us, as we know, the color of your face doesn't determine your character and who you are, and really you'll discover doesn't say much about you and me. Did you know that all of our physical assets, ears, nose, mouth, body, make up 0.012 of who we are? Is that any big deal about you or about me? That color is all important of your skin?
Did he just? So Dr. King didn't understand color? Dr. King didn't have an appreciation of blackness? Really, Ed? I recall Dr. King talking about black is beautiful. Press play. Dr. King.
Go to Korea.
I come
Play
here
King.
tonight and plead with you. Believe in yourself and believe that you're somebody. As I said to the group last night, nobody else can do this for us. No document can do this for us. No Lincolnian Emancipation Proclamation can do this for us. No Kennisonian or Johnsonian Civil Rights Bill can do this for us. If the Negro is to be free, he must move down into the inner resources of his own soul and sign with a pen and ink of self-assertive manhood his own Emancipation Proclamation. Don't let anybody take your manhood. Be proud of our heritage. As somebody said earlier tonight, we don't have anything to be ashamed of. Somebody told a lie one day. They couched it in language. They made everything black, ugly, and evil. Look in your dictionary and see the synonyms of the word black. There's always something degrading and low and sinister. Look at the word white. It's always something pure, high, and clean. But I want to get the language right tonight. Get the language so right that everybody here will cry out, yes, I'm black, I'm proud of it, I'm black and beautiful.
What MLK says right there absolutely contradicts Ed Young. But I need you to understand what Young is doing. Young wants to present this sanitized, this civil rights mascot view of King. He wants to strip Dr. King of his radicalness. He wants to take it away, and he wants to be somehow given credit for addressing the issue of race when, no, what you're doing is you are actually ignoring what King's life was actually all about, the issues he actually confronted and dealt with. If y'all watch the rest of this sermon, what you will hear Ed Young continuing and going on, talking about different aspects, talking about how God created one race. Absolutely. Oh, he'll mention how race is a construct, and he'll talk about that in a certain way. There's a certain point in his sermon where he talks about how the white supremacists are almost out of business mentioning the KKK. Really? FBI Director Christopher Wray testified before Congress. Play it. This is the FBI Director talking in the last couple of years. Listen.
The HVE threat, the homegrown violent extremist threat, is the new normal, and it's created a new set of challenges, a much greater number of potential threats, each with far fewer dots to connect, and much less time to prevent or disrupt an attack. These folks are largely radicalized online by the global jihadist movement. We're also keeping our eye on domestic terrorism from people who've come up with their own customized belief systems and hope to advance them through violence. We have, through the third quarter of this fiscal year, had about, give or take, 100 arrests in the international terrorism side, which includes the homegrown violent extremism. This year. But we've also had just about the same number, again, don't quote me to the exact digit, on the domestic terrorism side. And I will say that a majority of the domestic terrorism cases that we've investigated are motivated by some version of what you might call white supremacist violence, but it includes other things as well. It's a huge chunk.
Now, Ed Young, this idea that somehow we've eliminated that simply flies out the window because it's simply not true. But when you're living in your own safe, protected cocoon, and when you are standing with MAGA folk, you actually believe that utter nonsense when in fact, that's simply not true. Play this part of his sermon.
It's not biblical. Let me assure you of that, because without grace, we're totally out of business. So, with that being said, I'm going to do something with great reticence, but I think it needs to be restated. One of the greatest orations, Lincoln's Gettysburg Address, 2 or 3 others, would be Martin Luther King's I Had a Dream speech. There in the Washington Mall, maybe 1 million people present, millions of people heard it around the world. And Martin Luther King dreamed of a certain kind of America. I think we were getting there with not fast enough. 350 years of bigotry by leadership across the board is too much, folks. We can't deny that. We can't run from that. But we were getting there. And we're getting there because a lot of churches, Christians, that's how slavery got eliminated. In England, it was Wilberforce. And here it was Uncle Tom's Cabin. In here it was Henry Ward Beecher and others who stood against the evil and deadliness of racism. Oh yes, it was through the church when people awakened to see that in the Bible we are one in Jesus Christ, period, Selah. When they began to preach that and see that, that's where racism was eliminated and still being healed. But thank God, there's only one kind of slave we want to be. And that's a slave to the Lord Jesus Christ, where everybody...
I got to freeze right there. Ed, do you deny the reality of how the white church continued racism after slavery? How the Southern Baptist Convention, what they did? How In his own sermon, he actually contradicts it by saying when he passed a church in South Carolina, they had a sign where everybody wasn't welcome. And he said, no, that's not how I'm going to be leading this church. Doc, come on. You can't sit here and talk about how the church was the one that led the end of slavery. No, it was white men like John Brown who stood up against other white pastors who wanted to continue. Come on, Doc. We can't do that. And y'all, so you hear what he does. And so what he does is he continues in here, and then he goes on and he closes his sermon by reciting King's I Have a Dream, the I Have a Dream portion of King's speech. And see, this is the crux of what I'm talking about. See, this is what I'm talking about, the game that these white conservative preachers play in terms of how they love to play around. See, Ed, since you want scripture, Proverbs 12:17 said, a truthful witness gives honest testimony, but a false witness tells lies. Then it says, reckless words pierce like a sword, but the tongue of the wise brings healing. Truthful lips endure forever, but a lying tongue lasts only a moment. There is a deceit in the heart of those who plot evil, but joy for those who promote peace. Ed, you can't stand in front of the people and then recite the I Have a Dream portion of Dr. King's speech, but you ignore completely everything he said before that. You can't sit here and talk about, oh, how Dr. King wanted the races to get along and his children and he quote, and he starts crying and his congregation begins to stand up and they begin to clap and cheer and all that begins to happen. But how dare you as a Christian pastor give a 26-minute sermon extolling Dr. King? Not one time do you talk about what he stood against. Not one time do you recite the same speech where he talked about police brutality. He talked about voter suppression. He talked about the economic imbalance in this country. How can you sit here and even quote that particular speech that he gave at Southern Methodist University and totally look over the 6,000 other words he actually gave in the speech? Y'all, go to my iPad. If you actually look at the speech, Dr. King in the speech, he talks about the poor. He talks about voter suppression, still alive today. He talks about the economic imbalance when it comes to wages and jobs. He talks about all of those things. Yet I don't hear Ed Young talking about any of these issues. I don't hear him talking about what King was referencing. I don't hear him dealing with in all of these volumes the work King was talking about. Y'all go to YouTube. Ed Young has a speech called Socialism versus Capitalism, where he has some strong words against socialism. The same man who he praised in this sermon, guess what he called himself? A socialist. This book right here is called The Guaranteed Income. It is by Robert Theobald. This is the book. Reverend Al Sampson, who was one of two pastors personally ordained by Dr. King. This was the economic theory that the King believed in when it came to a guaranteed income. King said he was a socialist. But the same Ed Young has harsh words for socialists, yet he stands before the congregation, strips King of all of that to praise him, to make it sound like, oh, we all together. And if we could just love one another and just stand together. No, Ed, what it requires is for you to put some skin in the game. What it requires for you, Ed, is to not to drive your conservative theories when you at your church hosted Roy Moore Jr. when he was running against Doug Jones in the Alabama Senate. When you stood there and criticized the cash bail situation, blaming that for crime in the country, when you don't want to confront mass incarceration. Where are you, Ed Young, with the Poor People's Campaign and Reverend Dr. William J. Barber fighting for the 140 million poor and low-income folks in the country? You can't stand before the people and praise Dr. King and never mention the poor. You can't stand there and talk about how great and wonderful he was when literally the things that man was fighting for then still exist today. You can't sit here and strip this man of who he was and how he spoke against the reality of how white folks thought. But maybe I just ought to just share just a couple of things, and I'm almost done. And I'm gonna let the panelists comment, and then I'm gonna go to my next guest. But I just want y'all to understand that, this is what King wrote. White Americans left the Negro on the ground and in devastating numbers walked off with the aggressor. It appeared that the white segregationists and the ordinary white citizen had more in common with one another than either had with the Negro. Same MLK. The same MLK, this is what he said. Overwhelmingly, America is still struggling with irresolution and contradiction. It has been sincere and even ardent in welcoming some change, but too quickly apathy and disinterest rise to the surface when the next logical steps are to be taken. Laws are passed in a crisis mood after a Birmingham or a Selma, but no substantial fervor survives the formal signing of legislation. The recording of the law in itself is treated as the reality of the reform. Same MLK, Ed Young. MLK writes, the real cost lies ahead. The stiffening of white resistance is a recognition of that fact. The discount education given Negroes will in the future have to be purchased at full price if quality education is to be realized. Jobs are harder and costlier to create than voting rolls. The eradication of slums housing millions is complex far beyond integrating buses and lunch counters. Same MLK. Same MLK. He then says in here, Negroes have proceeded from a premise that equality means what it says, and they have taken white Americans at their word when they talked of it as an objective. But most whites in America in 1967, including many persons of goodwill, proceed from a premise that equality is a loose expression for improvement. White America is not even psychologically organized to close the gap. Essentially, it seeks only to make it less painful and less obvious, but in most respects to retain it. Most of the abrasions between Negroes and white liberals arise from this fact. Same MLK, Ed Young. Same one. Then he says, whites, it must frankly be said, are not putting in a similar mass effort to re-educate themselves out of their racial ignorance. It is an aspect of their sense of superiority that the white people of America believe they have little to learn. Y'all, that's just in the first 10 pages of the book. I take exception to the sermon because what Ed Young is doing is what white Christians and white Republicans often do. That is, they want to present a sanitized, clean, saccharine, G-rated version of Dr. King, minus all of the stuff that he was fighting for in his 39 years. You can't stand before your congregation, Ed Young, and praise Dr. King and how wonderful he was and how he preached the gospel if you never even mention the word poor. You can't stand there in your fine sanctuary and talk about how amazing he was and how he changed America if you're unwilling to commit yourself to the very things that he actually stood for. Because frankly, all you're doing, if you don't, is providing us with empty rhetoric that is meaningless. If Pastor Ed Young Sr. wants to impress me, I dare you to invite Reverend Dr. William J. Barber to your church. I dare you to invite the Poor People's Campaign and repairs of the breach. I dare you, Ed Young, to hold a 1 or 2 day conference on your campus with regards to the real life of Dr. King. I dare you to bring Reverend Bernice King to your church and the King Center and have a real dialogue. I dare you, Ed Young, to invite Reverend William Lawson and Reverend Dr. Ralph West and other pastors in Houston, the other black pastors in Houston, to come in and say how you, Ed Young, are willing to stand with them on the very issues that Dr. King talked about. Don't sit here and cherry pick out of a soul speech he gave at SMU if you're unwilling to address the other stuff he talked about in the very speech. Please, Ed Young, show me where you called out Senator Tommy Tuberville for his racist comments. Please show me where you have chastised Donald Trump, other Republicans, for their racist and xenophobic comments. Please show me where you are willing, at the age of 86, to stand in the same spot and say, I'm willing to lift up the same stuff Dr. King believed in. If not, all you did was give yourself a 26-minute pat on the back, shed some tears at the end, and got you an empty standing ovation from your audience, and they left that church just as uninformed as they were when you started. It's simple as that. Monique, you said, I'm gonna let you start. You sent me a text saying you heard the speech and you had views on it. You agreed with most of it. Now that you heard me lay this out, you can go ahead and comment.
Yeah, I don't know that there's ever been a single topic about which we've disagreed more. I believe, as you said on my show a couple of days ago, that it's the responsibility of white people in leadership to speak and galvanize in their own communities and thereby congregations. And I see someone like a Pastor Ed Young with roughly 85,000 people in his ministry who chose, didn't have to, ain't no special day, not MLK Day or nothing like that, chose the topic of racism and the history of slavery and racism in this country to spend the entirety of his sermon and talked about slavery and the hundreds of years post-slavery and the hideous actions of the founders of this country and of those who led our country for hundreds of years thereafter. He mentioned a part that was not included in what you covered, that he is not opposed to even legislation that promotes equality. He discussed the areas in which he thought personally he had been able to assist, such as going in and leading a church that had been led by racist and white supremacists and needing to reach agreement with leadership and the leadership voting and a little more than half of them agreeing so that he could continue there, but the governor, who was the deacon, being one who did not agree. All of these stories are documented. But to me, the thousands of people in that church that day likely heard more about the plight of Black people in this country from a leader they respect than they had heard in days and days and years and years.
He made no mention about plight.
They may be looking at.
He made no mention about plight. He didn't talk about.
Why are you interrupting?
No, I'm interrupting because he made no mention of plight. He didn't talk about economics.
Okay.
He didn't talk about education.
Okay.
He didn't do present day.
Okay.
No, he didn't. He simply was a flyover. He spoke at 30,000 feet. Okay. He literally made no specific mention about the condition of African Americans then or now, other than we were treated as animals. He simply did not.
Right. Except saying that we've come a long way, but we have further to go.
Well, can you say what we might want to be doing?
No. I'm not saying that he gave an anthology. I'm not saying that he gave an accurate history of slavery in America and the vestiges of it. I'm not saying that he gave an accurate history of MLK.
I'm not even focused on slavery.
I'm not saying
he wouldn't even mention a single substantive issue Dr. King fought. All he said was he preached the gospel and changed the world.
Well, Roland, as you say, it's your show.
No, as I say, it's called context.
No, but you had 20 minutes. I'm only trying to take 4.
Well, actually, I got you. But
okay.
First of all, but you've had 3.5, and so
okay.
But you had 3.5. So I'm gonna go to Robert, then I'm gonna go to Joe. But you did, Robert, go.
Well, I appreciate the effort. There's a meme going around, at least she tried. And I think that for many of these white people, as Monique said, this may be their first introduction to even the concept, particularly when you consume nothing but right-wing media 24/7. And so maybe within 10% of the congregation will inspire them to go home and do a Google search and find out the full context and find out the deeper meaning, to dive deeper into it, to think of themselves differently. I think that any conversation on it has to be the beginning, but we have to keep it going thereafter. What we've seen in the last 50 years or so is I call the Disneyfication of Dr. King, where they've taken the Dr. King that actually existed and turned him into this cartoon character that they can kind of trot out whenever they need to. They usually take the I Have a Dream speech, for example, that was 1,667 words, and they just say content of character, color of the skin, and that's all they know of the speech. So it's important for us, the people who do understand, who do know, to call these things out, to make people understand that that these individuals were more than just a tagline or a hashtag or a meme, that there was deeper work that was being done, and that the entire civil rights movement wasn't just Dr. King. As Chris Rock said, that's all we learned of Martin Luther King, that there were hundreds of thousands of people who fought and thousands who died and were imprisoned and lost everything for the journey that we are on, and those are going to be turned back in the upcoming years by the Supreme Court. So it's an important conversation to begin. Now that it has begun, maybe this is where we step in and partner in and walk in and say, well, let me give you some more context. Let's bring some black ministers, Reverend Barber or Reverend Sharpton or Reverend Jackson in his younger days, to give the full context on what happened and start building those bridges between the two. So I will give him an A for effort. But I do think, as you said, Roland, there's a lot more context that needs to be put in there, and a lot more education that needs to be had. But we need to at least begin the conversation, since many of these people are so recalcitrant to the idea being even presented, that they're storming school boards to stop critical race theory.
Well, Joe, what you're not going to do is try to throw shade at the 1619 Project, Black Lives Matter, and woke agenda. We don't know what the hell you're talking about, but then you want to cover it up by saying, well, I love Dr. King. Joe, go ahead.
You know, I think one of the scriptures that is mentioned in that same speech by Dr. King is Amos 5:4, and a lot of people know the scripture. Us church folk know the scripture. It says, "But let justice roll down like a river, and righteousness as an ever-flowing stream." But there was a but. So what had happened before was what had happened was people had been making the sacrifices that they normally did. Oh, let's kill an animal. Oh, let's do the things that we normally do, God, and it will pacify you. But what God was saying was, what you used to do and what you're doing now isn't enough. So let justice roll down like a river. You know, if there was this hypocrisy and this selective memory and this self-righteousness, frankly, despite the effort, some may call it effort, this is the reasons non-Christians won't become Christians.
Got it.
And I'm a Christian saying it. And so really, Martin was called a militant. Ask him, let's ask Pastor how he felt about Martin when he died. He's old enough to be around. Was he actually reciting the words from I Have a Dream back in 1963? I bet you he wasn't. Does he have a picture of Jesus that is historically accurate visually today? Probably not. It might be that some people in his congregation, if they saw Jesus as Jesus was to be seen in the natural, they wouldn't even be followers. And so therefore, we are at a place where we have to be truthful. And even the Bible says, 2 Thessalonians 10, people have not a love of the truth. For that reason, they'll be sent strong delusion to believe the lie. At the end of the day, regardless of his effort, regardless of his intention, and in fact, I don't have a heaven or hell to put him in, and he might get the same grace that I'm in need. I know he needs it. But at the end of the day, he was wrong, and he was wrong from the pulpit, and he's aligned with Donald Trump, who calls 2 Corinthians 2 Corinthians. He's aligned with fascism, and he's aligned with a lack of truth. Going to truth will make people uncomfortable. Everybody celebrates Martin as if he lived a long life and they didn't kill him, but they did.
Well, and again, all I'm simply saying is, if you're going to cherry pick the black supremacy part, don't ignore the other 6,000 plus words of what he laid out. But it's amazing how that's the only part of the speech he referenced. All right, folks, back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment. When you talk about blackness, and what happens in black culture. We're about covering these things that matter to us, speaking to our issues and concerns.
This is a genuine people-powered movement.
There's a lot of stuff that we're not getting. You get it, and you spread the word.
We wish to plead our own cause. Too long have others spoken for us. We cannot tell our own story if we can't pay for it. This is about covering us. Invest in black-owned media. Your dollars matter. We don't have to keep asking them to cover our stuff. So please support us in what we do, folks. We want to hit 2,000 people, $50 this month, raise $100,000. We're behind 100,000, so we want to hit that. Y'all money makes this possible. Checks and money orders go to P.O. Box 57196, Washington, D.C. 20037-0196. The Cash App is $RM Unfiltered. PayPal is R Martin Unfiltered. Venmo is RM Unfiltered. Zelle is Roland at RolandSMartin.com. All right, folks, there is a saying that we're all familiar with. That is, hit dog will holler. Well, whenever you hear people start whining, complaining about something someone else says, typically that means that hit dog will holler. Two hit dogs hollered on Fox News, Kayleigh McEnany and Harris Faulkner. They were discussing a segment that I did with Tiffany Cross on MSNBC, and they decided to share some thoughts. Here is their segment.
To that point, it is dangerous when you take half of a country, Harris, and say, I'm putting you in this box of, as our president said, a threat to democracy, clear and present danger, the language he has used. And then what has been interesting is it's not just him. Some lapdogs have followed the president's orders and using the same language. Let's take a listen.
Obviously, Republicans, I think, are the biggest threat to democracy. We don't separate right-wing extremists and Republican Party anymore. And these days, it feels like we are not just at the brink of a civil war, but that one has already begun.
This is an outright attack on women in this country. That is how I see it. That is how more and more women and those who support our right to make decisions about our own bodies, that is how we see it. You know, this is a literally call to arms.
We are at war with these people. These folks are evil. They have allowed evil into their house with Donald Trump. He has now dominated the party. This evil is spreading. And when you are in a war footing, you have to respond accordingly.
You know, that kind of talk is so irresponsible. There are things that are going on. We've had a justice on the Supreme Court with an assassination attempt in this country. We've had things that could tip us off into a situation that we don't want on September 3rd. Tiffany Cross, an anchor at that network, and then one of her guests, I guess, Roland Martin, I don't even know what he does there, talking about how we're on the brink of something. Let's talk about what we can do to take down the level of hate in the conversation. And comparing things to Hitler and to slavery, why can't things live in history where they were? They were terrible enough.
Yep.
Do they need to be brought back and be diminished so that we can raise something above it? Hillary Clinton saying, well, this person or this situation is like Hitler. What is she talking about that's like Hitler in this country right now? Is she so ignorant that she doesn't know how many people died?
Yeah.
There's nothing going on in this country right now like Hitler.
All right. I'm going to deal with Kayleigh first. First, Kayleigh says that Biden's lapdogs followed his lead. Let me help you out, Kayleigh. I've never worked for President Joe Biden. I've never worked for President Barack Obama. In fact, I ain't never worked for a politician. You, on the other hand, literally was a lapdog for Donald Trump. You literally lied to the American people on a regular basis. You right now are a fake journalist sitting in a host chair on Fox News when you have absolutely no training for the job whatsoever. In fact, your entire network is a lapdog for Donald Trump. The suck up that takes place by Sean Hannity, Laura Ingraham, and on, and Tucker Carlson, on and on and on. Peter Hegseth, it's unbelievable. There's a reason your network is getting sued by Dominion because of the lies that y'all pushed when it came to the voting election being rigged. There is no greater evidence of a network being lapdogs for Donald Trump. And you know why you're lapdogs for Donald Trump? Because your ratings went down after the election when you properly called Arizona for Joe Biden. And what did your network do? Your network fired the guy who made the call. There is no greater example, Kaylee, of lapdogs than you and Fox News. In fact, Fox News, your employer, is such a lapdog for Donald Trump, y'all actually employed the man's daughter-in-law. How much more of a lapdog can you be when you are employing the daughter-in-law of Donald Trump? Now, let me deal with you, Harris. First of all, you called it irresponsible. Then, Harris, you tried to act like you didn't know who the hell I was and what I do. Harris, I got your phone number right here. And you got my phone number. I mean, you do remember when I took you to the Apollo's spring gala. Do you want me to pull the photos up? When I took you down to Harlem, where the black folks were? Remember the red dress you wore? Oh, do you want me to pull those receipts? I don't even know what he does for the network. It's called some basic ass research, Harris. I don't work for MSNBC. Y'all invite guests on Fox News all the time. So maybe you should do some research and know that I was an invited guest on Tiffany Cross show, and I don't work for MSNBC. Typically, Harris, I'm sorry, you know how this works. If someone is a Fox News contributor, you say Fox News contributor. If they're a guest, you just simply say who they are. That's what Tiffany did. So please don't try to sit here and be dismissive and act as if you don't know who I am, Harris. Well, you know exactly who I am, which is why when you co-hosted the NABJ award ceremony in Miami, you and I talked there as well. Yeah. So don't let me bring out the black receipts on you, Harris Faulkner, and don't play this game with your audience. Now, you actually said, oh, the comments were irresponsible. I'm going to show you irresponsible, Harris. And what I think is irresponsible is when you're supposed to be a so-called news anchor. First of all, Tiffany Cross is not a news anchor at MSNBC. She's a show host, not a news anchor. You should know the difference between being a news anchor. Now, you are a so-called news anchor at Fox News, Harris Faulkner. You actually said what's irresponsible. I'm going to tell you what's irresponsible when the New York Attorney General, Letitia James, lays out by detail how Donald Trump has cheated when it came to his financial records. This is how you responded, Harris Faulkner, on Fox News. All right, try it now. Okay, hold on. I'm going to reset it. Let me reset it. Here we go. Check this out, y'all.
New York State Attorney General has just announced a rather lengthy and detailed layout of the lawsuit that she is putting against Donald Trump, former president. Some of this is really inside baseball unless it's your tax dollars in New York. And some people may even accuse it of being political because we're 48 days away from the midterm elections. And both presidents, the current and the past, are certainly being looked at to help candidates out. So we'll see how this plays out. We're certainly going to cover it, and we'll bring you highlights as they happen. But the big headline in all of this is the lawsuit by the state of New York today, just announced by Letitia James.
I'm sorry, Harris, can you please explain to me how in the hell that was inside baseball? I mean, you literally just said inside baseball. How was it inside baseball? And then you say, well, you know, man, it was your tax dollars. I mean, so you're in New York, it doesn't affect you. That was actually a news story. Harris, that was a perfect example of what it means to be a lapdog when y'all broke away from the news conference and you were unwilling to show the full news conference because you know your boy Donald Trump wasn't going to be happy. But in fact, the real reason, Harris, y'all didn't want to show that full news conference is because your audience did not want to see it. It's the same reason, Harris, that y'all are unwilling to even talk about the January 6th hearings. In fact, Harris, being a so-called news anchor, I would think that you would be calling out your fellow Fox News colleague, Tucker Carlson, who literally right here, this is from Media Matters website, where he was proud of the fact that Fox News is hiding the January 6th hearings from its audience. Oh, interesting. Can y'all cue up Harris's comments again, please? Cue the part, because I really want to hear where she talked about, oh my goodness, the violence and how people have been hurt in this country. Please. Let's hear that again, since Harris is so concerned about political violence in this country when she mentioned someone who was arrested for trying to kill a Supreme Court justice.
You know, that kind of talk is so irresponsible. There are things that are going on. We've had
Find me
a
some
justice
January
on the Supreme
6th
Court
video
with an assassination attempt in this country. We've had things that could tip us off into a situation that we don't want on September 3rd. Tiffany Cross, an anchor at that network, and then one of her guests, I guess, Roland Martin, I don't even know what he does there, talking about how we're on the brink of something. Let's talk about what we can do to take down the level of hate in the conversation. And comparing things to Hitler.
You want to take down the level of hate in this country? Well, hell, Harris, why don't you call out your own network? Your own colleague is proud of the lack of coverage on January 6th. Oh, Harris, shall I remind you of what happened on January 6th? Shall I remind you of the political violence? Shall I remind you of the police officers who were beaten on that particular day? Shall we remind you how Republican and Democratic lawmakers were terrified of the folks who were storming the U.S. Capitol? But your colleagues at Fox News, they have labeled it a walk in the park. They've said it was just a tour. That's how they've labeled it. That's interesting, Harris, because guess what? Go to my iPad. This is today. Harris, Kyle Young, a 38-year-old Trump fan who brought his teenage son along as he assaulted then D.C. police officer Michael Fannin and another officer at the Capitol on January 6th, was just sentenced to more than 7 years, 86 months in prison. Do you mean that violence, Harris? Your network won't even show the hearings in prime time. Your network, Harris, is the greatest lapdog in America for Donald Trump and the Republican Party. The folks who sign your check, Harris, sucks up to Trump and MAGA. In fact, you employ them, you celebrate them, you tout them, you praise them, you sit next to them on the couch, Harris. And so if you want to actually have a discussion, Harris, you got my cell phone number, because I damn sure got yours. Call me. You want y'all got a man who sits in that center seat there? Why don't y'all call this man if you want to have a debate, if you want to have a conversation? And then, Harris, you had the audacity to say, oh, we need to dial down the rhetoric. Really? This here is the video page for Media Matters. Here you have Tucker Carlson praising the recently elected fascist in Italy. Yeah. Right there. You've got other Fox News hosts on here who do all they can. You're gonna love this one since you're concerned about violence, Harris. Here you got Fox anchor Shannon Bream says it's just not good optics for DOJ to arrest suspect who allegedly assaulted an elderly man outside an abortion clinic. Wow. Harris Faulkner is concerned about the violence in America, but one of the so-called news anchors at Fox News says it's not good optics to arrest somebody who assaulted someone. Last I checked, I thought y'all were the Law and Order Network. I thought y'all actually cared about those things. You know, it's interesting when I hear Harris say, oh, how we need to dial down the rhetoric and things along those lines. That's real interesting when on your network, Harris, on your network, this is what your dear leader said. On Fox News, Donald Trump says immigrants are poisoning our country. Is that the rhetoric that you want to dial down, Harris? Ain't that something? Jesse Waters calls the homeless an invasive species. Dana Perino says we should involuntarily commit the homeless. Is that the type of language you want to dial down? Oh, here we got one. Jesse Waters calls union president a vicious woman. I don't recall you saying a damn thing about any of them. In fact, Harris Faulkner, you got Will Cain, who I used to destroy on CNN with his ridiculous ass arguments. This is what he said about Congresswoman Ilhan Omar. She is a real parasite on our political system. Please, Harris, can you show me the transcript where you have criticized them for the language? Oh, it probably doesn't exist, Harris. In fact, since Kaylee, since your grossly unqualified self wants to talk about lapdogs, I told y'all you got to be a lapdog when your network employs Donald Trump's daughter-in-law. This is Donald Trump's daughter-in-law on Fox News, paid by Fox News, talking about AG Letitia James, who is going after her husband. Fox contributor Laura Trump, bloodthirsty New York AG Letitia James caused children to die by shutting down the illegally self-dealing Trump Foundation. Y'all, the Trump Foundation was self-dealing and she actually trying to pump it up. And then she said, oh, it caused children to die. No, the only thing that died was Donald Trump not being able to use foundation money to pay for portraits of himself. See, folks, what I need y'all to understand is there is no greater lapdog for the entire Republican Party, for the conservative movement, and for Donald Trump than Fox News. And Harris Faulkner, you are a gross disappointment for the comments that you made. First of all, you couldn't even do basic journalism and fact check what my role is, because one doesn't exist at MSNBC. So that's one. Two, you are sitting next to somebody. You really should be mad. You really should be mad to say, how am I sitting next to a grossly unqualified person who prior to becoming press secretary was nothing more than an airhead, talking head at CNN. And the only reason she was hired at CNN because she was sitting here touting Donald Trump. You really should say, as a journalist, a so-called journalist with credentials, it's embarrassing that I have to sit next to Kayleigh McEnany every single day as a co-host on Outnumbered. Harris and Kayleigh, the next time y'all want to talk about someone being a lapdog, and someone being irresponsible, I suggest you go to your nearest mirror. I'm done. All right, folks, back to that Roland Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Don't wait till November 8th. We can vote today, y'all. Early vote started this week.
We're on Savannah State University's campus. We will be dorm storming today, giving out treats for everyone. We hope to see everyone at the polls when it comes to November.
If you believe we got power, let them know. Make some noise. Put a fist up. I need to see a fist in the air because we got power. Come on, you put it up. Come get your shirt. We're out here in the streets of Savannah, Georgia. James, do not forget to go vote. I got you. If we vote the right people in, we can make a change. We can get these resources in our community.
I am a woman, and it is important that we have the say-so of what we want to do with our bodies.
We're concentrating on entrepreneurism, providing young people with resources and training that they need in order to change their trajectories. We want Black down. Democracy is on the ballot. Voting rights is on the ballot. Voting suppression is on the ballot. I am most passionate about those three combined because they all impact each other.
Savannah is my home. I care about my community, and I care about representation in my community.
Our voices are still going to be heard no matter what kind of obstacles try to come up against us to stop us from voting. We're still going to be standing our ground.
I see the effort that's being made to keep our communities from voting. So that makes me realize it's even more important, because if it wasn't important, they wouldn't be fighting to make sure we couldn't vote.
This doesn't stop this year. This is a forever movement.
We're going to exert our power as a people, walk in our rightful place. We're going to change our communities, fight for our communities, and build our communities.
All right, Halle Bailey stars in Disney's new movie, Little Mermaid. And you've seen these videos of young Black girls just awesome. Oh, my, seeing this sister as a Little Mermaid. But there's a lot of other people who are not happy. On the YouTube channel with the trailer for the movie, there were 1.5 million thumbs down dislikes. Well, they disabled it, folks. They disabled it, took the comments down and everything. We have seen this. Look at this, 8.1 million views. We've seen all this conversation back and forth. But it's not just Little Mermaid. What's that new show on HBO? One of them Thrones shows. House of Dragons. I don't watch it. And so, Lord, there's some white folks up in arms because, Lord, there's some Black characters. And they complain about how you're getting away from what the book was about. I mean, and the crazy thing is, y'all, we're talking fiction. We're talking what's made up and make believe. Well, Jane Elliott has been doing this work for years. She started this the day after Dr. King was assassinated, April 4th, 1968. And she's been going hard ever since. She joins us right now. And Jane, I know, when we have a promo for my book, White Fear, and you're quoting there and you were saying, look, this nation is getting more racist. The bottom line is these people, I fundamentally believe Trump has unleashed these folks. They are just angry and upset. And this is why I wrote my book. I said how the browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. They cannot handle the fact that now you're seeing Black folks and Latinos and Asian folks just showing up. It's no longer is white is right, everybody else step back.
For the last 400 years, we have misrepresented or underrepresented or not represented people who are other than white. And now people who are white are complaining because there is one fairy tale that that has a Black, not Black, a dark brown female as the heroine. Why is that such a big deal? I know what's a big deal. White folks are scared to death. They know that within 30 years, white people, as they call themselves, will have lost their numerical majority in the United States of America. And they're scared to death that people of color are going to want to treat us the way we have treated them. And so they have to. We had a president, well, we called him president, who built a wall, spent millions and millions of dollars to build a wall to keep brown-skinned people out because he said brown-skinned people reproduce too rapidly. Now, what we're dealing with right now is a fallout from that kind of attitude and that kind of statement made by the leader of the United States of America. What do you expect little people to do except say the same kinds of things that he is saying and has said and will say unless we put a stop to this nonsense?
Now,
if we would stop using the vocabulary of the 14th and 15th century, if we would stop calling people white because that means purity and goodness, and black because that means savage and evil, if we would start calling people what they are, which is varying shades of brown, we wouldn't have to deal with those two opposites. We have been put on a situation by the Spanish Inquisition. Torquemada and company were going to make everybody Catholic, and they were killing people they thought weren't Christians. Then they realized they'd killed a bunch of Christians, so they had to find another way to decide whether a person was Christian or not, because you couldn't tell by looking at him, and you still can't. But anyway, so he decided they would use skin color. So the lighter-skinned people were called white, which is the color of goodness and purity, and the darker-skinned people were called black, which is the color of savagery and evil. We have been doing that for another 400, that's only 450 years ago, approximately. And we're still doing it. People, it's time to give it up. Let's grow up. We are in a young nation, but it's time to grow up.
You said something that is on point, and that is they are afraid that we're going to do to them what they did to us. Pat Buchanan wrote that more than 2 decades ago. Mitch Landrieu, in his book, came out a couple of years ago, he actually said, hey, white people, I've known black people all my life. Trust me, don't be scared. They're not going to do to us what we did to them.
But you see, they think that we believe, when we say the golden rule, do unto others as you would have others do unto you, that the way white people treat others is the way they want to be treated. I don't think that's the way I want to be treated. I don't believe in the golden rule. I believe in the platinum rule that says do unto others as others would have you do unto them. Treat others the way they want to be treated, not the way you want to be treated. But you see, we're using every possible means we can to enhance the idea of the rightness of whiteness. And by doing it, we are proving that we are less intelligent, that we are less civil, that we are less socialized than people of color are, because people of color know better than to act like this. They know better than to complain because the little mermaid isn't their color. They have known better than to complain about all those fairy tales that they read all those years and that were pushed on them by teachers all those years. And none of the heroes and none of the heroines to speak of were anything but white.
I had to trip out at the dragon show, and I'm like, yo, they talking about dragons, and this notion, and these people were like, there were no black people during that period. Like, it's dragons.
It's a period that didn't exist. It's a period in which it's just ridiculous. It's a fairy tale. It makes no sense. And teachers need to say to their children, this is a fairy tale every time they introduce one. But instead they teach them as though this has really happened, boys and girls. Well, it didn't really happen. It's not going to happen, and they don't have to worry. White people don't have to worry. Yeah, they do have to worry. Because eventually somebody is going to say to them, do you not realize that only 15 to 18% of the population of the earth is classified as white? Do you not realize that white people, so-called white people, have been in the numerical majority always? Do you not realize in the numerical minority always? We have always been in the minority. Why are people all of a sudden catching on to the fact that there aren't as many of us as we thought there were? There aren't as many of us as we thought there were, and it's time to get over it. By the year, within 30 years, white people will be a numerical minority in this country as they are all over the world. Get over it. Haven't you anything better to argue about?
There was if y'all could cue that Bernard Shaw comment up, I want to play it. I played this when he passed away because we were in Las Vegas in 2007, and he made a comment to the white men in media that I thought was on point. And Jane, as I'm sitting here, looking at this, we are still operating in America where you still have the first, the first African American, the first woman, the first Latino, the first Asian. And I was looking at Ron Brownstein's Twitter feed, and where you have these Republican folks who are polled, and they say that racism against white people is just as bad or even more so bad discrimination as it is against black people. And you have the folks like Donald Trump and Turning Point USA and all these people and this conservative media machine that's driving this. And I keep telling people, Rupert Murdoch and Lachlan Murdoch, they know it's all BS, but they are feeding this fear of their white viewers, and they're driving in. They're saying, they're coming, they're coming. That's what all this crap is with the migrants and sending folks away. They're coming, they're coming, they're coming. When anybody who understands the demographic patterns of any country, you cannot have a future if you do not replace population. Now, the great replacement theory. Hey, it ain't, white people stop having kids. Sorry.
Don't ask every white woman who wants to make a living and get an education to have children. They aren't going to do it. They're going to wait until they're 42, and then it will be too late. And then they'll say, "Oh my goodness, well, what am I going to do about this situation? Look what society did to me." People, get over it. By the time these young people get ready to have children, they will realize that as the hole in the ozone layer gets larger and larger, more and more sunlight is allowed to enter our environment, and more people who have pale faces are going to die of melanoma, which is a skin cancer that you get if you don't have enough melanin in your skin. Let me tell you, people of color are going to be very much in demand for reproduction in the future. Mark my words, you're laughing now, but you wait 20 years. You won't even have to wait 20 years, because they're going to see that if they want their children, their grandchildren, and their great-grandchildren to survive, they're going to have some melanin in their skin. That's the way it's going to be. This is going to take care of itself. And all the silly stuff that you've got going on about the Little Mermaid today is going to fade into the past, and we're all going to just laugh ourselves silly over it. That anybody would get upset about this is totally ridiculous. And it proves the ignorance. It proves the self-imposed ignorance of the so-called white population of the United States of America. And we've got to start, that's another thing, we've got to stop calling this country America and start calling it the United States of America, because the word united is the most important part of that title, and we better start to use it, because we had 4 years of someone who tried to divide us. And this very kind of thing is what happens when you have somebody who is trying to divide people on the basis of the color of their skin.
In my book, White Fear, How the Browning of America is Making White Folks Lose Their Minds, when I was writing it, the publisher said, well, there were several publishers rejected it. And they were like, well, but I get it, but what should be done? And I said, what should be done? I said, is what Jane is doing, is what Tim Wise is doing, is what other white folks are doing. That is having honest, full, in-your-face conversations saying, you have got to understand what the truth is, what the reality is. And it must be happening in country clubs, in meetings, places where I'm not at. It must be happening at dinner tables. And so, and I love those videos that took place in 2020 of these kids basically cussing out their parents who were voting for Trump. And these young white kids, they were like, Mom and Dad, you know what the hell you're talking about? Yeah. Because they were challenging them. What they were saying is, you're not going to pass this on to me. Linda Tirado is a journalist, and she talked about the racism of her parents. And she was talking about the ring around the tub, and her daughter was taking a bath or something. And then she was basically saying, we're white. We don't leave a ring around our tub. That's just those dirty black kids. And Linda, she tweeted this. Linda said, I will not allow my child to go visit with my parents because my child is not going to learn their racism. That's what has to, I say, y'all, this ain't for black folks to solve. This is where white folks gonna challenge each other and say, no, you're not gonna make those comments in front of me and have a belief. We must be a constant of challenging of this nonsense, Jane.
Well, we've all learned to be racist. Anything you learn, you can unlearn. It's time to unlearn our racism. And it's also time to put, not the thing that everybody is talking about now, CRT. For me, CRT means curriculum respecting truth. Now, who could argue with curriculum that respects the truth? When we start really telling the truth, it will change the way children feel about one another and the way teachers feel about the children who come to them as students.
Panelists, let's see. I'm going to start with the educator first. I'm a Congo. You get the first question for Jane Elliott.
Wow, it's truly an honor to talk to you, Ms. Elliott, for all of just the work that you've done and inspiring so many of us who do this work in diversity education. I just really want to thank you. The question that I have for you is, could you speak a little bit to the reverse aspect of this? Because I hear people talking about a black person playing a Little Mermaid, but they've had nothing to say about the over 100 white characters throughout history, actors who have played non-white people like Othello and Genghis Khan and Cleopatra. Could you speak a little bit to that hypocrisy?
That hypocrisy is what put us where we are today. We're absolutely determined as palefaces not to admit the truth and not to see the truth. And when you walk into a room, or as happened with me, I was giving a speech at a college at the university in Texas. In the middle of my remarks, some teacher stood up and said, "I just look for the person's heart." We deliberately teach people to ignore the largest organ on a person's body, inch by inch, which is their skin, in order to think we have to get along with them. This is so ridiculous that we are going to pretend that the Little Mermaid couldn't possibly have been anything but white. And first, it's a fairy tale, but the first modern human beings that evolved on this earth were not white. Whites came last, and we are going to go first. Make no mistake about this. Long after we so-called white people have died of melanoma or some other problem because of the lack of melanin in our skin, all these people of color will still be there, and they'll still be productive, and they'll still be creative, and they'll still be doing wonderful things, just like they were when they managed to populate every landmass on the face of the earth. People of color from countries in Africa at the equator originally populated every landmass on the face of the earth. Why are we afraid to admit that, and why aren't we teaching that? Why aren't we teaching that this continent, this what we call the United States of America, this continent, was discovered by people of color between 20,000 and 10,000 years before Columbus was a gleam in his father's eye. It's time for us to stop teaching the lie and start teaching the truth. It will make everything easier for everyone. Did I answer your question?
Yes, you did.
Representative Shannon.
Okay.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you so much, Jane, for your work. I worked as a diversity trainer for years, and a lot of the training that we used was based off of previous videos you've done. So I know you've been doing this for a long time. This whole controversy is completely ridiculous. That is some of the best singing that you've ever heard in any Little Mermaid movie. And the only thing that I'm mad about is that they showed the trailer now, and we have to wait until the middle of next year to actually see the movie. That's the only crime that I see. But here's my question for you. A lot of times when we see white people who are very educated on racial justice issues, when you talk to them, they will tell you that personally their families have discarded them, or other white people just sort of chalk them up as to be traitors for talking about standing for racial justice. Do you feel like, has that personally happened to you? And do you feel like folks like yourself and others who have done a lot of this work have been able to really make a dent into really educating white folks?
Hell yes, it's happened to me. I have been discarded by everybody who knew me as a child or as a young person. My mother kicked me out of the family after my father died because she said I have ruined their reputation of the whole family with that eye color thing. So that I understand that. I understand her anger. And I suppose I should feel sad about that. And I did cry for about 5 minutes, and then I got over that because my life was much better when I no longer had to go over and babysit my mother. So yeah, that's one of the things you do. If you put your head above the parapet, somebody's bound to try to shoot it off. So if you don't want to go into this kind of situation, just keep your mouth shut and go along to get along. And remember that the only thing necessary for the perpetuation of evil is for good people to do nothing. And as long as we continue to do nothing, this situation will continue to fester and boil. But when enough of us stand up and say, no, you're not going to do that in my presence. No, you're not going to tell that black joke in my presence because, number one, you don't know what you're talking. You can tell Irish jokes in my presence if you want to because I'm Irish and I know how strange we are. But you're not allowed to tell, I'm fussy about the jokes I'll allow in my presence. And many of the things we say are not funny at all to the ones who are on the receiving end of it. And when people say, well, you didn't understand, I say, wait a minute. The way you say it is the problem, not how I take it.
Scott Bolden.
Hi, Professor. I'm not only a big fan, I just love you for what you've done and what you stand for. I think the greatest example of white America taking over or projecting an image is through their religion. That Jesus was blue-eyed and blonde-haired, when the Bible says that the region he was born in, Palestine, or what we believe to be the Middle East now, that he was of matted hair and olive skin, and it made sense. I'd love to get your comment on that. And then secondly, if all of this is true, if none of us are born with a racism gene, we're taught environmentally, then why is it so hard? Why can't we get a national dialogue on race going where you have those fearless conversations? You know, Roland talks about his book and, you know, table conversations with family and friends, but leadership mandates more than that, doesn't it? That we have this national dialogue. Clinton and Obama just could not get it going and were criticized for it. But I'd love to hear your thoughts on those two issues.
Well, I don't remember what the two issues were, but I'll tell you how I think about this.
Well, one
women
was Jesus
of color, women of
and
color,
Christianity.
women of color can solve this problem. Women of color can solve this problem. They know what the problem is, and they know how it has to be solved. And they're going to come forward and they're going to take care of it. We aren't going to have a choice as to whether we have a dialogue about this from now on. We're going to have to start telling the truth, because the very survival of this nation depends on our being able to take advantage of all the brilliance that is in those minds of people of color, which we have denied. If your children and your grandchildren, your great-grandchildren haven't read the book Nile Valley Contributions to Civilization, have you read it?
I have not, ma'am, but I will.
Get that book and read it this week, and then show it to every one of the younger people that you deal with, because we have denied and we have refused to acknowledge and recognize and take advantage of all the brilliance that is in the kind of people who discovered this continent and every other continent on the face of the earth. It's time to start talking about this honestly, but when you try to talk to most white people about racism, the first thing they'll say is, I don't see color. Now, it's time for people to stop, refuse. Have you had that said to you recently? I don't see color, right?
Oh, I've heard it many times.
I work in big corporate law. Yes, ma'am.
Oh yeah, and every time some fool, melanemic woman says that to me, I say, I knew that you didn't see color, because if you saw color, you wouldn't have your hair that color. So I guess you really don't see color. And then she gets all upset and angry and says, you don't know what I'm talking about. I said, oh yeah, I know exactly what you're talking about. You don't want to see you don't want to relate to a person unless their skin is the color that you approve of. Madam, there are no white people on this earth. If you want to read about what happens to white people, Google Tanzania. And in Tanzania, there is a large group of albinos. And you'll find out how ugly it is. Yes, have you Googled Tanzania? Do you know about Tanzania and how albinism is treated there? Because if you don't, you really ought to take a look at that. It will change your attitude where color is concerned in a hurry. People, we are all shades of brown. Get the National Geographic magazine for April of 2018 and read it. Everybody should do that, because it's a short, simple description of what's going on in this country, what color is, where it came from, and how very, very valuable melanin is.
This was, I was in the room when this happened. Bernard Shaw got the Lifetime Achievement Award from the National Association of Black Journalists in 2007. And he said this, and this was one of the things where, you know, I wish Bernie had said it when he was the chief anchor at CNN on the air to the world. Play it, folks, and then we'll talk to Jay on the flip side.
Wake up. Wake up. Globally, you are an island speck in an ocean of color. The reins of power will weaken, and so will your grip. If you do not faithfully and fulsomely support our nation's greatest strength, diversity, if you do not share, you will lose. Diversity. Diversity is not racial, ethnic, or gender encroachment. Diversity is our national survival. To you caught in the middle, stay vigilant. You must stay strong. You must carry on. If not you, who? To you, starting careers, embrace risk. Mold change, making it work for you. Better to walk the plank.
So Jane, I wanted to, what he laid at, he was specifically talking to white men. And I remember the faces in the room, they were kind of like, oh my God, did he go there? That was 2007, 15 years ago when he said that. And when we look today, when we look at the numbers, we look at who still is in control. Yeah, there's been some change. Sure, a black woman is president of MSNBC. Sure, a black woman is president of ABC News. But the reality is, when we talk about who controls the images, newspapers and digital and movies and television, it is still white men. And that's why this battle continues. And what he said there, you got to stay vigilant and keep fighting. Thing that you've been doing, what I've done, what others have done, because that's the only way it changes. We cannot give up.
But what we're saying is white men. These are not white men. These are pale, stale males who will be boys all their lives until somebody teaches them the truth about who they are, what they are, and where we all came from. The first modern human being on this earth was undoubtedly a person of color, and we've got to get over the idea of more than one race. There's only one race on the face of the earth. Until we give up the idea of several different races, that's how long we're going to have this problem. These aren't racial problems. These are problems of ignorance. You can't change the color of your skin, but you can change the ignorance of your mind, and we could do that. And education could do that. Education should have done that by now, but instead we are still teaching the same old nonsense. It's time to start teaching the truth.
The gentleman, the young man who's writing a book on you called me and he interviewed me, and he said, Roland, are you surprised that there are not more Jane Elliott's? And I said, no, it's not surprising. I said, because it takes a level of courage to say what needs to be said. And I've said there should be 10,000, 100,000, 1 million Jane Elliott's and Tim Wises and others. I said, because that is what it's going to take. I said, because you have to confront it head on. That eye test, again, when people play, they play those videos, they still go around when you said, how many of y'all in this room would trade places with a black person? And nobody says anything because they know. What did Chris Rock say? Ain't a white man in America want to trade places with me and I'm rich. Because they know what that history has been.
But you see, there's more than 10,000 Jane Elliott's. There are a whole lot more black women than that. And every woman of color has forgotten more since breakfast than I will ever learn about racism. They have the answer because they know the problem. They know how it feels to be right on the receiving end of it, and they do not want to cause that feeling in anyone else. If you haven't had that experience, you don't realize how damaging it is. They have had that experience, and they're going to be the ones who lead us out of this mess. Make no mistake about that. They are going to be the ones who lead us out of this mess.
Jane, it's always a pleasure. I appreciate you speaking truth. Thank you for always taking our call. I tell people all the time, one of the flat out best panels I ever did was you and I hanging at University of Michigan. We could have went on and on and on. I felt sorry for the moderator because she was trying to ask questions. I'm like, just let us do what we do.
We'll listen to you later. We have more to talk about than you.
Indeed. Jane, you take care. We appreciate it. Thank you.
Well, thank you for calling. Goodbye now.
All right, take care. All right, folks. Jane Elliott there. Fascinating conversation. All right, folks. Back to our Roland Mark Unfiltered video in just one moment.
hatred on the streets. A horrific scene, a white nationalist rally that descended into deadly violence.
White people are losing their damn minds.
As an angry pro-Trump mob storms the U.S. Capitol, we've seen shots.
We're about to see the rise of what I call white minority resistance. We have seen white folks in this country who simply cannot tolerate black folks voting.
I think what we're seeing is the inevitable result of violent denial.
This is part of American history. Every time that people of color have made progress, whether real or symbolic, there has been what Carol Anderson at Emory University calls white rage as a backlash.
This is the rise of the Proud Boys and the Boogaloo Boys. America, there's going to be more of this.
Here's all the Proud Boys, guys.
This country is getting increasingly racist in its behaviors and its attitudes because of the fear of white people.
The fear that they're taking our jobs, they're taking our resources, they're taking our women. This is white fear. All right, folks, in Savannah, Georgia, a black alderwoman accuses a white city council alderman of calling her a ghetto black bitch on video. There was an altercation that took place after a recent city council meeting, and it was captured by body cam footage from a police officer. Watch this.
She treats employees like shit all the time. I'll be happy when she's gone.
Okay, so here's what I can do. When you're asking me to go
That's what I thought.
the moisture in her front yard, fine.
I guess that makes you worse because he's polite.
But I'm telling you,
Yeah. Ask him.
If I could sell that house.
Ask him. Ask him. Did you get that on your body cam? Him calling you a ghetto bitch? Did you get that?
It's called
Yeah.
West.
He called me a ghetto bitch.
Without me signing.
Yes. One of y'all got it on your body cam, so I'm sure you do.
That property because you eroded it with all the storm. If I could have sold my house, I would have done it.
what we looked at on the woman, just putting in perspective.
Billy, you know what? You are just really. I feel sorry for you. It's a real disappointment. A real disappointment, and I hate that things have resulted to what they are. I really do.
Now, Alderman Curtis Purty isn't heard on the police body cam calling the alderwoman names, but he admitted to calling her that in a phone interview. Now, prior to what took place outside the chamber, things got a little testy on the inside. Watch.
Aye. Opposed. Motion passes. Is there a motion regarding this license?
Yes.
Mayor Johnson, I move that we approve.
Second.
And properly moved and second that we approve this license. All in favor indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed.
Nay.
Can we go to the board?
We sure can.
And
No.
I need
Ma'am.
to introduce that into the record.
No, the hearing has been closed, ma'am. All right, all in favor by approving this license indicate by saying yay.
I'm trying to,
Wow. That's sad.
talk about racial equity.
Motion
Not at all.
fails.
There's your racial equity, city manager.
What does
Thank
race
you.
have anything to do with it?
A whole lot.
I don't see it.
Well, you wouldn't.
Ladies and gentlemen, please. Ladies and
Why is
gentlemen.
Why?
Ladies
You
and
tell me
gentlemen.
why.
Ladies
Asking
and
you.
gentlemen. Ladies and gentlemen.
Shut up, Keisha.
Ladies and gentlemen.
Move for a 5-minute recess, please.
No, ma'am. No, sir. We're going to move on. We're going to move forward. All right. We will now move to.
So you just told me to shut up, Purdy?
No,
Mr. Mayor, if she could address the comment to you, not to me.
Mayor Johnson, I
Yes.
want to know if Mr. Purdy, did you just tell me to shut up?
I'm not going to.
All right, joining us right now is Savannah, Georgia Alderwoman Keisha Gibson Carter. So what is going on here? Has this been a contentious battle between y'all for months, years? What's going on?
I'm in a contentious battle for the citizens of Savannah. With regard to the interpersonal relations or the lack thereof, I really try not to focus too terribly much on that. Nonetheless, to make this really short and sweet, there's a rule of our council that essentially ices out the minorities on council, and by minority I mean those who are in the minority vote by number. Myself, Alderwoman Bryant Lanier, and Miller Blakely are three older persons who essentially are the most vocal, the most progressive and aggressive older persons, and the most accessible to the citizens of Savannah. But because we have a rule of council that says we cannot put forth an item for consideration as legislation for consideration unless we have a majority vote. So no place else in the whole United States of America does a sitting older person, notwithstanding that I am the #2 vote getter on council. I actually got more votes than the mayor. I represent all of Savannah in an at-large post, and I cannot present an item to be considered. So fast forward 2.5 years later, you can imagine that that's caused a lot of frustration. Nonetheless, we have figured a way to backdoor our way into getting what the citizens need, and that is helping them understand the importance of mobilization, forming a collective voice, and citizen engagement. And as a result of that, we are able to, in tandem, match that with our force on council and in the community and get the attention of the people and put others on council who would be interested in supporting these efforts that ultimately support our community when it comes to crime, poverty, homelessness, and forced displacement. So we face pushback. And that pushback comes in the form of political hits that's often carried out by mainstream media here in Savannah, both print and television, as well as public assassination of our character, sullying our reputation, if you will. You see, Curtis Purdy has told me to shut up, and he has called me a ghetto bitch, a black ghetto bitch, that is. And so there is nothing, if you were to Google him, that comes up. But when you Google Keisha Gibson Carter, the media has done a pretty good job highlighting and sensationalizing minutia on council. This Curtis Purdy, this individual has filed a bogus ethics complaint. I was shepherded through a process where I was humiliated, and we wasted thousands of dollars of taxpayer money. We waste precious staff time only to have Curtis Purdy come to me a week later and apologize and say he was encouraged to file the ethics complaint, and he subsequently apologized. Well, we continued. We stayed on the wall. We did not give up. We continued to advocate for the citizens of Savannah, only to now find myself in a firestorm where I'm accused of calling, just by the sheer fact that I said the word racist or told a colleague that his behavior and rhetoric was racist on council, I was voted out of council chair. And physically, the mayor moved my seat physically. And so, you know, these are things that people said that I said. Nothing was captured with regard to the ethics complaint where it was stated that I cursed people out and I hit somebody with my pocketbook. It's the most ridiculous accounts of behavior that can be matched with public government. Nonetheless, we rose above it, and we are still in position doing what we do every day, doing what I've done for this city now for nearly 30 years, and that is advocating for her, inspiring her, and protecting the citizens of Savannah from my place of this elected office. And so now we continue to be concerned because, you know, this is dangerous political warfare. I knew what I was signing up for. I'm signing up to run for the top job of the city of Savannah. I will be the 68th mayor of Savannah. And if I intend to occupy that post, surely I have to be able to take somebody calling me a ghetto bitch. And I have to be able to accept that someone would say, shut up to me, notwithstanding it's a live city council meeting. But what I'm here to do is what others who are watching cannot do for themselves. There are women in this country There are girls in this country whose bodies are under threat, and our voices daily are under threat and attack. And I cannot sit idly by, despite the fact that these egregious acts happened some months ago, about 4 weeks for one and about 2 weeks for the other, and I try to ignore it. But this individual, Curtis Purdy, posted on Facebook and bragged about what he did. But more dangerous than him bragging about what he did, Curtis Purdy is a sworn police officer charged with protecting the citizens of the community where he works. He's a university professor at Georgia Southern University here in Savannah at the Armstrong campus. Curtis Purdy is supposed to mitigate and de-escalate situations. This individual came out of his way. I left the city council meeting about 8 to 10 minutes early to go out and meet with my citizen and to help mitigate the situation that she was in with our assistant city manager, Heath Lloyd, only to have Curtis Purdy come out of chambers. And as opposed to taking the northern exit, he came in the southern direction where I was, where the assistant city manager and where the citizen was. She right away stated that she did not want to speak with him, and I turned to him and said, she doesn't want to speak to you. I have it. You've ignored her. Go on. So first and foremost, he never should have entered my space. He never should have entered my space. And secondly,
okay. So here's what I'm confused by. Okay, where's the mayor? Where's the city council when it comes to don't y'all have some sort of rules with conduct when it comes to how council members talk to each other?
Yes, we do. And
so what happened?
Nothing. He has not been reprimanded. He has not been censured. The mayor has not acknowledged one word about his behavior. He's not expressed any concern. In fact, he announced on his show, on his live Facebook show, that he supported Curtis Purdy. And that here again is another reason why I'm speaking up and speaking out, because as I stated,
this $60 bathroom.
So this is, so it's just strange to me. Again, like I say, I've seen other city councils where they've done some stuff, but this is quite strange to me here. So, okay, so you don't have any admonishment from the council, from the mayor. What are your fellow members of city council saying? Are they just ignoring this?
Well, Alderwoman Miller Blakely, my Post 2 colleague, and Alderwoman Bryant Lanier, the representative for District 1, have been very, very supportive and have encouraged me to push for an internal affairs investigation, because as you see, most of the body cam footage is of me, and you hear me, but you don't hear Curtis Purdy when the police officer was standing right next to him. Now, you should know that the police officer is a paid sergeant who basically provides personal security, fetches the mayor's breakfast, lunch, and dinner, and drives him around in a city-issued vehicle while also getting a stipend. So this individual has allegiance to the mayor and was motivated to not capture what Curtis Purdy stated to me, but was motivated to capture what I said. And this was the second time, he used the body cam footage. They turn this footage over to the media often, and once it's on the media desk, they sprinkle their magic on it, and it turns into something totally different from what the intended purpose was or what the scenario in fact was. And so then I'm often tasked with damage control and trying to paint a different picture for the public, which I essentially have decided that no longer am I interested in chasing down and making things right. But what I will do is continue to speak up, speak out, and advocate for those who are most vulnerable among us. As I continue to advocate for lowering taxes, I continue to advocate for integral behavior and actions within our local government, as well as how we are treating our city staff and ensuring that we have adequate services. And so you asked the question, what are the council's rules? Do you exercise these rules? Yes, the rules and the punishment, if you will, it's been used on me. And it's been used on me for things that no one heard. that was not captured on a body cam. It's been used on me for things that people just made up and said. But you have a guy who actually was captured in a live city council meeting saying,
He did make a post. I want to read this here. This is what he actually posted on Facebook. He said, "Did I tell the older woman at large to shut up? Of course I did. I did not apologize for saying it. I'm sick and tired of the nasties and lies that come out of her mouth. She thinks it's okay to make homophobic remarks and call people names, especially during a meeting. I'm offended, and so are the citizens of Savannah. You can't act like you care about LGBTQ people or other groups and make the remarks that you do. If anybody needs to apologize, it's her. I will always have and always will stand up for those who have been oppressed or bullied. It's time to get back to work. God bless." Final comment, your reaction.
You know, the piece I find problematic about that is, one, as I stated, he was bold enough to do what he did. Two, he was not smart enough to post that on social media as a police officer. And number three, you're lying. Not only did you commit the act, but you're lying about why you committed the act. And when I said this is dangerous political warfare, Curtis Purdy knows that I have the heart and spirit of this community in the palm of my hands. And he knows that I personally have dedicated my work through the Rape Crisis Center, as well as just a person, a citizen of Savannah, to assisting individuals in the LGBTQ plus community here in Savannah and outside of Savannah, and my family even. And so what I won't do, because what I don't like for people to do is to tell me how many Black friends they have to say that they're not racist, right? We're not going to do that. But what we will do is we will continue to let my work, my life's work, and my current work speak for me. And so the fact that he lied about why he told me to shut up, because nothing was captured. It was nothing remotely close to where a homophobic remark would have fit or matched. And he said the same thing. And he says that I said these homophobic remarks because he's married to a man. And he says that I called him a pedophile, and that's why he called me a ghetto bitch. Well, the last time I checked, gay people are not pedophiles. And so that doesn't match. It doesn't make sense. He's reaching, he's grabbing, and he's digging a deeper hole for himself. He was honest enough to say he said it. Well, just say you said it, because that's what's in your heart and in your spirit.
Got it.
And the definition of me bullying, the definition of a bully is a person where there is imbalance of power. It's where behavior happens frequently and continually. I see this person twice a month at the city council meetings. We don't say anything to each other unless he's challenging me on council, that is. And he carries a badge and a gun. How can I bully you, right? And so this is the same council. The irony that you should know, Mr. Martin, is that the mayor is African-American, and this is a majority African-American council. 7 out of 9 of us are African-American. This is the same council who voted to desecrate the weeping time, the property where the largest sale of enslaved people, African people, happened right here in Savannah, Georgia. This is the same council, a super African-American majority council, who won't vote to change the name of Calhoun Square to Susie B. King Taylor Square. This is the same council who allows for us to go about, and this piece where he told me to shut up, this came about because I was reminding our city manager that we are focused on inclusion and equity. And we were denying yet another African-American establishment a liquor license, where we have 600 establishments here in Savannah, and fewer than 15 of them barely are owned by African-American people.
All right, then. Well, look, sounds like it's still lots of drama there in Savannah, so certainly keep us updated on what happens there. We really appreciate it. Thanks a lot.
We thank you for your interest.
All right, folks, back to our Roland Martin Unfiltered video in just one moment.
Pull up a chair, take your seat. The Black Tape with me, Dr. Greg Carr, here on the Black Star Network. Every week, we'll take a deeper dive into the world we're living in. Join the conversation only on the Black Star Network.
All right, folks, racist Senator Tommy Tuberville of Alabama, he acted a fool speaking at the Donald Trump rally just the other day, and he chose to show all of his racism. Check this out.
Some people say, well, they're soft on crime. No, they're not soft on crime. They're pro-crime. They want crime. They want crime because they want to take over what you got. They want to control what you have. They want reparation because they think the people that do the crime are owed that. Bullshit. They are not owed that.
Oh, the white folks cheering. Look, I keep everything he said. I told y'all in my book, White Fear. Did I not tell y'all what this is all about? I told y'all this is the whole deal. All right, here's the other racist, Marjorie Taylor Greene from Georgia. Hear this fool.
Joe Biden's 5 million illegal aliens are on the verge of replacing you, replacing your jobs, and replacing your kids in school. And coming from all over the world, they're also replacing your culture. And that's not great for America.
Oh, they're replacing you and your culture. Y'all now understand my book, White Fear. White Fear, how the browning of America is making white folks lose their minds. Hello. They are just speaking point blank. Now, that's what we always seeing. And the thing here, Congo, is they're showing who they are. And guess what? That's the Republican Party. That's their voters. And so what Tuberville is saying, what Marjorie Taylor Greene is saying, it's not out of the ordinary. This is who today's Republican Party is. Because those folks cheering, those are their voters. They are absolutely pushing those buttons of white fear.
It's what Dr. Maya Angelou said. When someone shows you who they are, believe them. And not only believe them the first time. And to be quite honest, Roland, I mean, we've been doing this, not you in turn, I'm talking about mainstream media, at least since Trump was running. All of this, oh my gosh, I can't believe this. How could they? Blah, blah, blah. They don't call them out. They just keep putting these guys on to get ratings. And you have been one of the few people out there who's been calling it out, actually attacking them every time it's set. And on top of that, helping black people understand a mobilization plan to fight this. Because there are no more dog whistles. Everything is a bullhorn now. We know who they are. We've known for at least 5 years. Many of us have known a lot longer than that, especially going back with Trump to the 70s and the 80s. The question becomes, what are we willing to do about it? What pressure are we putting on their sponsors? What are people doing in this mainstream media to give other people like Marcus Flowers, who's running against Marjorie Taylor Greene, a platform to be able to speak up, who's a dedicated citizen of this country doing incredible work? The media, what was the former head of CBS who said, like, the Trump circus may be bad for America, but it's great for CBS and its ratings? They're doing it all over again. And we have to use every platform that we have to attack them verbally, to call them out, to call out their sponsors, and most importantly, mobilize to vote, because they are showing clearly that they want to take us back and take any rights. And look, and Tuberville, a man who, exploited black people through football, and that was your claim to fame. We don't want what you got. We just want equality, and just get out of our way, and we're going to keep doing what we need to do.
Absolutely. And look, Julian, I keep telling people what Donald Trump did was he opened the doors, tore the hinges off, and said, hey, let your racism flag fly.
There you go. I mean, he unleashed a beast. The beast was always there, but was somewhat tame and knew better than to do certain things. But he unleashed the beast and probably gave it, some kind of stimulant, because he had everything has been on a fast track in terms of taking away our rights, talking racist nonsense. I mean, Tuberville, when you look at the composition of the state of Alabama, he is a walking proof of gerrymandering, of anything negative about the vote you can think of. Black Alabamans are not proportionally represented, and we talked last week about the congressional district that they're trying to take. And Tuberville, as Obakongo said, he exploited black people with his football career. I don't care so much about that. He does not belong in politics. He and Herschel Walker could have an ex-football, not too bright senators convention.
Well, again, we know who they are. Renita, again, I keep telling folks, this is why I wrote the book. This is going to continue. This is like not out of the ordinary. This is going to be the norm, and we must fight these racists at every turn.
Absolutely. No, you're right. This is going to continue. This is the norm and has been the norm. Listen, I'm not going to repeat what the other two panelists said, but most of us who live in Georgia already know that Marjorie Greene Taylor is a committed idiot. We're already familiar with that. Hoping we can get some different election results this cycle. But I want to talk about what has got to be our solution as folks on the left, Democrats, or anybody who is not with the Republicans. And I think that has got to be, centering issues that matter to Black voters and talking about issues that Black voters want solved in their communities. Because right now we continue to see that, Democrats are, while they're running campaigns about how much they can reach across the aisle and work with the Republicans, you never see Republicans doing that. They're not running on being bipartisan. They are running on continuing to make boogeymen out of Black people. And that is how they are ginning up their base. We have got to be centering things that people want to hear about, like what we're going to do about police accountability issues, what we are going to do about getting reparations. Black folks are the majority of the Democratic Party, and that means that we need to have Black candidates who are talking about Black issues squarely and directly to get our folks up and out and ready to vote.